Hello, who just joined?
Yeah, this is Doug Harris.
Greetings, Doug. We'll be starting in about 30 seconds. Thank you for joining us. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this conference call with the Congresswoman. This is the way we'll go. The Congresswoman will give an opening statement, and then we will take questions from you all in the order that you came on the call today. Okay? If you have any questions afterwards, we will take those too. Congresswoman, you may begin.
Thank you very much, Mike. And I particularly want to thank those of you who have been really supportive of our community during this time, getting information out to Virgin Islanders, keeping everyone abreast, holding those of us who are elected officials to task to get that transparency and information out during this incredibly difficult time that not only we as Virgin Islanders, as Americans, but everyone around the world is facing right now. As many of you know, there have been 2 previous pieces of legislation that Congress has passed and that the President has acted on. The first piece was an immediate public health bill, which was tasked to get funding to public health agencies, local hospitals, etc., immediately upon the coronavirus, COVID-19, being declared a pandemic. The Department of Health of the U.S. Virgin Islands received funding in that instance, and our office has been working with the Department of Health, with Commissioner Encarnacion, with the governor, as well as his staff and cabinet members, and also with the legislature. I know that our legislature is meeting now to support the efforts of the governor and our office and the people of the Virgin Islands to allow us to get through this. And I just want to assure you all that we're all in communication and working together. I thank them for the work that they're doing as we speak right now, debating the measure to ensure that we have sufficient funding to continue government operations. The second bill was a Families First Coronavirus Act, which was created to get and set the parameters for additional funding. In that legislation, which passed a couple of weeks ago now, we allowed the virus testing to be free. We set aside information for and mechanisms to extend family and medical leave, as well as unemployment insurance. As we speak, I just came off of the floor myself debating the third bill, which is a $2 trillion economic package called the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. In the House, it is House Resolution 748, and it is being taken up and debated now as we speak. I'm here in Washington, sitting in my office with a skeletal staff. My chief of staff and one other individual are here with us as we have been working with the leadership of the House, with the governor's assistance in the Senate with his lobbyists, to ensure that Virgin Islanders are included in that piece of legislation. I wanted to outline for you all what is included in the bill and how the Virgin Islands fits in there. I've been, so many people in the Virgin Islands have continually asked me, will the Virgin Islands be included? And I want to assure everyone that yes, we are. That our office has been working not just in this instance, but throughout this Congress, making sure that members, particularly those in leadership, committee chairs, know our issues, know what's important to us, know our needs so that we are not forgotten. And so during this unprecedented time in our world, a time when Virgin Islanders have a great deal of uncertainty about their future, I want you to know that the Congress is not only addressing the threat to the lives and livelihood of American people, but we as Virgin Islanders are recognized as American people in this bill, and we have been included in the funding. So for some of the components that you all may be interested in learning about, we know that many people have been furloughed or laid off at this time. In this piece of legislation, there's a new pandemic unemployment assistance program, which benefits individuals who do not qualify for regular unemployment compensation and are unable to work because of COVID-19 public health emergency. Regular unemployment benefits will be provided during this time with another $600 a week supplement that the federal government is making, and Democrats ensured that this is able to last for 4 months. We were able to get in the additional $600 a week for American workers so that they can continue to meet their needs of their household and themselves. Small business loans. Small business employers in the Virgin Islands with 500 employees or fewer are eligible to apply for federally guaranteed loans. The loans are available immediately through existing Small Business Administration certified lenders, including banks, credit unions, other financial institutions, and there is now a streamlined process to create other lenders into the program. So the size of the loan is tied to the small business's average monthly payroll, and that can go back to February 15th of this year, February 15th, since that's when the coronavirus really started to be recognized and impacted this country. The maximum loan is $10 million. And in addition, as long as the small businesses retain their employees and issue paychecks to those employees, that portion of the loan that's used to cover payroll, mortgage interest, rent, utility payments will be forgiven at the end of the crisis. I just want to let the press know that my office has been in discussions with SBA and the local CDBC office. We will be having a Monday call, a lunchtime call, where we are going to operate through Zoom, through the apparatus of Zoom, to have a meeting with small businesses in the Virgin Islands who are interested in learning more about this program and how they can take advantage of it. So that will be Monday through Zoom with SBA and SBDC to support our small businesses. We are sending out information to the Chambers of Commerce, as well as inviting other small businesses who may not be a member to join us in Zoom so that they can hear how they can take advantage of this. There's also been a large pot of funding that is available for state and local governments, a coronavirus relief fund that's going to be available to provide direct fiscal transfers to the government. $3 billion has been reserved for the territories in D.C., and if we utilize the recent official census estimates, that would give $75 million to the government of the Virgin Islands of the United States for fiscal year 2020. In addition, there is an additional $500 billion in an exchange stabilization fund within the Treasury Department, can be used for loans, loan guarantees, and other investments for territories. It says investments to businesses, states, and municipalities in 2020, and as defined in...
Welcome to Hangouts Meet. Enter the meeting pin followed by the pound key.
Under the definition of states, that does include the territories. We also have emergency appropriation under what is being called the Marshall Plan for Hospitals. There is $100 billion in an emergency fund to reimburse hospitals and other providers for uncovered costs due to the pandemic. This includes hospitals, healthcare providers, clinics in the Virgin Islands. There is also a fund through the Department of Interior assistance to the territory. $55 million has been appropriated for the Department of Interior for Insular Affairs to assist the small territories. That includes Guam, Northern Mariana, American Samoa, and the Virgin Islands of the United States will be there for us as well. The $500 billion that I spoke about in the Exchange Stabilization Fund, the funding, $100 billion that's available for hospitals, healthcare clinics, as well as the transfer of funding for localities, including the Virgin Islands, will be utilized, I hope, by our local government. My office ensured that that language is in there, and we are hopeful that our local government will take advantage of that, and we are here to support their needs and to assist and facilitate that should they require from us. One of the other pieces of legislation that is in the bill that myself, Abigail Spanberg of Virginia, as well as Rodney Davis, Republican from Illinois, really pushed was to ensure that there is funding in there for schools. There is funding of $30.9 billion in educational funds, and which includes $13.5 billion in formula grants for states and territories to help schools deal with closures, meet needs of the students and teachers, as well as to purchase technology for online learning. This, the amount that the Virgin Islands has available exceeds the amount that the Department of Education gave me as their need to purchase and to create a fully online system for the students of the Virgin Islands. We know that our children have already suffered major setbacks to their education caused by the 2017 hurricanes. We closed schools for several months, many other long periods. Thousands attended schools in temporary structures and double sessions. We know that a large percentage of our students receive free breakfast lunches, and many do not have technology in their own homes to be able to engage in distance learning. There was a projected cost that the Department of Education gave me to be able to establish and maintain a system for 1 year, to develop curriculum, train, support functions for distance learning, and the amount that the Virgin Islands is eligible for exceeds that amount. So I'm very pleased with that. There's also money that's set aside allocated to higher education, which includes the University of the Virgin Islands, which will cover lost revenues, technology costs for distance learning, and grants for students for food, housing, and other expenses. I know you all have a lot of other questions, so there are a lot of other things, and I have myself and my chief are here to answer any questions you may have. Know that forbearance and moratoriums on foreclosures are also in this legislation. Homeowners with FHA, USDA, VA, or other federally backed mortgages, including those guaranteed by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, may request forbearance on payments for up to 12 months with no fees, penalties, or extra interest. There's also a 60-day moratorium on foreclosures and evictions of homeowners with those same type of mortgages. There's also a moratorium on evictions for if you are rental property with a federally backed, you are renting in a facility that has a federally backed loan or federally backed, public housing or others. Owners of federally subsidized properties or property with federally backed mortgages may not evict or charge penalties or fees to tenants who cannot pay rent for 120 days following the implementation of the Act. The final one, which I know so many Virgin Islanders are asking about, is the direct payments to working Americans. So the rebates are available to the Virgin Islands. The amount of the rebate depends on the family size. There is a payment of $1,200 for each adult individual. If there's a joint filers, That's $2,400 for individuals with an income of $75,000 or less. As well, there is a $500 per qualifying child under the age of 17. So that amount is also reduced if the taxpayer's income exceeds $150,000 for joint filers, $75,000 for an individual, or $112 and $500 for someone filing as head of house. Under the Mirror Code system, which the Virgin Islands has in we operate under a Mirror Code with the IRS. These payments will be made by the government of the Virgin Islands with a reimbursement for payments by the U.S. Treasury. Rebates do not need to be repaid, and the amount that you have will be determined either by your federal income tax return filed in 2019, if you have not done that, from your federal income tax of 2018. If you do not file a tax return, you're a non-filer, you are eligible for a rebate as well. There's no earned income requirement to be eligible for the rebate, but non-filers may need to take additional steps to receive the rebate. Social Security Administration is going to be sharing information for Social Security beneficiaries who may not file, as well as we are reaching out. The Treasury Department will be reaching out and giving guidance to those who may receive just Medicaid. The IRS will conduct a public awareness campaign to reach non-filers and provide them with information on how they can also receive the rebate. Now, I know that was a lot of information. Mike, if you want to take it in terms of organizing the questions.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Congresswoman. And before I go, again, I'm Michael McQuarrie, the Communications Director for the Congresswoman. I think we had a few more people join. Could you let me know who has joined since then?
Judy Schimmel, St. Croix Avis newspaper.
Thank you, Judy. Anyone else?
Amaziah George, State of the Territory News.
Welcome, Amaziah. Anyone else? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go in the order of that you called in. And our first question, Congressman, will be coming from A.J. Rao from the Daily News. A.J., you may start.
Hey, good afternoon, Congresswoman. How are you?
Good afternoon.
My question is, I see that the territory, the Virgin Islands, is grouped together with the other territories when it comes to a lot of these allocations. And I guess my first question is, are you concerned that the Virgin Islands will not get its fair share compared to the other territories? And do you have a more specific breakdown as far as the actual funding that's going to be coming to the Virgin Islands in terms of the hospitals, UVI, for example? I just wanted to get your thoughts about that.
Sure. I'm not concerned that the Virgin Islands will not get its share. Numbers were bumped up to ensure that in the funding we would receive an amount that is based on our need, based on our population. As you can see, when you talk, we are not one of the smallest territories. That would be Northern Marianas, American Samoa. We are a little bit larger than Guam, definitely dwarfed by our sister of Puerto Rico, but members were very cognizant of the change in population for the District of Columbia, as well as with Puerto Rico in making those. I gave you the numbers that are direct numbers that are available to the Virgin Islands government, which based on our allocation for the first portion, hold on just a second, that was the, Lord, where are we? Yeah, the transfer to states and local governments that is not a grant, that is not a loan, but is a grant, will be $75 million for the Virgin Islands government in fiscal year 2020. However, in terms of the stabilization loans, the loans guarantee, other investments that are available to the Virgin Islands, as well as the funding that is sitting there of $100 billion for emergency funds for hospitals, healthcare, will be determined by what the government of the Virgin Islands, our governor and our legislature, as well as our hospitals and health clinics determine that they need. They will need to make those applications. They will make that determination of what funding is needed, and we will facilitate and support as much as we can those requests.
And my other question...
And then in terms of the Department of Education, based upon the allocation that we have, that is over $38 million that is available to the Department of Education for assistance and creation of stabilization and expansion of an online distance learning system, which is more than $10 million, more than is greater than what was requested by the Department of Education.
And my other question was in regard to the direct payments. When can Virgin Islanders expect to receive those direct payments, assuming the bill is signed today?
Most estimations on a federal level is that it will take 3 weeks for that to begin to go out. However, as I stated, because of our Mirror Code system, this will need to be something that our local Bureau of Internal Revenue prepares, and there will be a reimbursement available to them. And so we are, that will be a question that I'm sure you all will be directing to them, and we will wait to hear how long it will take them to process that. It is our hope that they are preparing that as we speak, knowing that this was something that might have been happened, so that that reimbursement can happen very quickly.
Thank you,
thank you very much.
Thank you, AJ. Our next question will come from Bill Kostler from The Source. Mr. Kostler?
Hi, yes, thank you. With the unemployment insurance, the local unemployment fund is nearly depleted. So there appears to be an additional $600 per week, a large bump up that's federally funded. But let's say, for example, would that mean there is no local funding in the unemployment fund?
I'm sorry, Bill. It's really hard for me to hear you. Can you repeat what you just asked?
Let's try. 1 second, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Is this better?
Oh, much better. Thank you so much.
Okay. With the unemployment insurance, the federal government, as I understand it, is putting in $600 per week as a bump up on top of the base level that the state has. But the Virgin Islands fund is nearly depleted and can't handle its normal. It can't handle the base payments for very long. Is there any federal funding for that, or will it be sort of like reduced to the $600, which is still substantial, federal funding?
We have reached out to the department. My chief of staff has reached out to the Commissioner of Labor, to Mr. Malloy, to talk with him about what needs they may have. We have not, we are in communication. I do not have an answer for you with that. At this point, my responsibility was to make sure that we're getting what's available at the federal level. And should there be additional assistance that's needed from the Department of Labor, by the Department of Labor for the Virgin Islands, we're happy to do that. But we are trying to be in communication with him to see how we can support that.
Mm-hmm. Can I get you to elaborate a little bit on how that $500 billion fund works for the territories?
The $500 billion that is available for for loans.
Is it all loans? Is it
yes.
Also a grant?
So there's a transfer to state and local governments, which is a coronavirus relief fund that provides direct fiscal transfers to territory governments. Under that one, the Virgin Islands is eligible for $75 million for fiscal year 2020. There is a second pot of money, which is a coronavirus exchange stabilization fund within Treasury, which can be used to make loans, loan guarantees, and other investments to municipalities like the Virgin Islands. How the government of the Virgin Islands determines to go after those loans will be up to the governor to decide.
So that's a fund that's available, and for example, hypothetically, the governor could say we need a stabilization loan of $100 million and apply for it.
That's
a
correct.
fair way of? Okay.
That's correct.
Have you heard, as far as the strategic? This is separate from the legislation, and you may not know anything at the moment since you're in the air, but about things like the strategic reserve of medical equipment, of personal protective equipment, of ventilators, and so forth. Is there, any word on whether the territory is going to be able to get more ventilators, more equipment, or anything, or on the federal?
Well, as we have all been watching. Let me say this: that we have been in contact with NIH as well as HHS, who are the ones who are doing the rapid response to jurisdictions who have need of PPEs as well as ventilators and other medical equipment. My understanding is that as the Virgin Islands is making its need, much of that is being triaged. As we all see, there are hot spots which need to be taken care of immediately. I do not know the amount of requests at this point that the Virgin Islands has made. We had been working with them on ensuring that a testing equipment was available. They do have that now, and our understanding is that will be up and running by Monday. And as additional needs come up, we are facilitating that, but that is between the government, the local government, and the federal government. As they need assistance, we're trying to provide it.
Thank you.
But, Bill, there's a shortage throughout the nation. Yeah. We are not unique in this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And just so everyone is aware, I did not bring this up, but we are already engaged in negotiations on a fourth piece of legislation, which is much more in terms of economic, another economic stabilization, which my understanding is will be more modeled after an ARA, if you all recall, from 2008, which will be how to jumpstart economies. In that piece of legislation, we're looking to diversification of our economy, support to ensure that we are, in the same way that we were able to get additional funds to rebuild for resilience, I am looking to try and create resilience in our economy so that as disasters happen, so that as vagaries of the economy happen, we are not so heavily reliant on tourism as our sole driver in our economy.
One last question. I'm sorry. There's nothing in the bill that I think directly relates to this, but a lot of people have been asking us whether they're going to still have to. There's been student loan moratoriums, rent, forgiveness, eviction forgiveness, and so forth. But a lot of Virgin Islands are wondering, are they going to have to pay their very high utility bills? Is there any way, for example, out of that $500 billion fund, anything in this particular piece of legislation could in any way help subsidize people who are struggling to get by trying to pay their very high utility bills to the local utility?
Well, the last phrase you made was key, which is the local utility. And so we're relying on the local government to take leadership in that to support its citizens related to their utility bills and other bills. We have tried to step in areas where we could, such as, rent and mortgage moratoriums in areas where federal loans were utilized for that. And I don't know, this is something that we'll try and support in the next bill. I'm looking to try and do something like that. But as I said, there are other things that needs to be done in our local utility that would give the federal government the confidence in supporting it in that way.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Costa. Next we'll have Robert Moore from the VI Consortium.
Yes. Good afternoon, Congresswoman.
Good afternoon, Mr. Moore. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Good.
Thank you. So my question basically deals with timing, and particularly with the $75 million grant that will be available to the territory. Just a couple of days ago, the governor requested from the legislature an emergency $60 million allocation. He indicated, I think at the time, that there were 2 to 3 days of cash on hand for the territory. So what I'm wondering is how quickly can the local government expect to receive some of that funding?
Well, that's a great question, Mr. Moore. This has all been moving terribly fast. We believe that this will move faster than getting rebate checks to individuals because, that recalls making calculations, in some instances actually sending out paper checks. Whereas after our first coronavirus bill, which was to support public health areas, that money was available within a week. So the assumption is that it will be somewhere within that time frame.
Okay, thank you. And if I could follow up a little bit on Bill's question about electric utility bills, would the local government have the flexibility to subsidize or assist utility ratepayers with the federal funding that it receives? Can it do it on that end with those federal funds?
I'm still looking at, this bill is 883 pages, and a lot of it has been left to the federal regulators to create regs and parameters and processes. And so we're looking into that now. How the money, what are the four corners from which this money can be used. It is our belief that the funding is for state and local government, Virgin Islands government, operational functions. But recall that there's also a second pot of $500 billion that the Virgin Islands government can apply to, and then additional support for us, which is the insular areas, $55 million, which is also there.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Next, we'll have Kay from the St. Croix Avis.
Hi, it's Judy Schimmel from the St. Croix Avis. Good afternoon, Delegate.
Good afternoon, Ms. Schimmel.
Here are my two questions. My first question is, has your office been in touch with the chief executive officers of the Schneider Regional Medical Center and the Governor Juan Luis Hospital on St. Croix, and what have those conversations been like?
We have been in conversation with them and continue to be with their operations individuals, with the board, and, the funding that is available, we believe that this additional support that's available and funding that's available to our hospitals under the Marshall Plan for Hospitals will be really helpful to them in not just dealing with, equipment, but also to assist them in uncovered costs due to the pandemic. Whether that's with our dialysis, whether that's with stabilizing our ICU on St. Croix at Juan F. Louis, in other ways as well. I saw and went on Sunday to Schneider and saw that they were creating a pre-screening area at the back entrance for individuals before they come in. This is funding that's available to them to make those changes and make that support. And as they make their requests, we have, constantly reiterated to the governor's cabinet members, the commissioners, as well as to our clinics and others to let us know what their requests are so that we can help on this end to make sure that their needs are met as well.
That brings me to my follow-up question, which has to do with the utilities as well, but also from the other side, which is the Water and Power Authority. The two government agencies that racked up their electrical bills the highest and the fastest were Juan Luis Hospital and Schneider Regional Medical Center. Is there any anticipation about how the federal government can assist the hospitals in that particular uncovered cost, which grows very quickly, especially possibly during a medical crisis?
Well, as I said, that's what this funding is there for, and we will see what the hospitals, what the health clinics request. We're going to, ask them to be as comprehensive as possible and see if, and support them in the request that they make for that funding.
My second question has to do with the Office of Disaster Recovery, which was established by the government of the Virgin Islands following the passage of Hurricanes Irma and Maria. I believe that we've heard that the office has been having problems interacting with the federal government in order to get the emergency funds that they're supposed to get for disaster recovery from the 2017 hurricanes. Is there any thought about the mechanism that's going to be used to administer the emergency funds related to the national disaster now linked to COVID-19?
In terms of whether it will be under the Office of Disaster Recovery or some other agency?
Correct.
The funds coming into the government of the Virgin Islands and how those funds are utilized is within the office of the governor of the Virgin Islands, not within my purview. And while we support them and can make requests, I think that that's more appropriate for the governor with the legislature and even getting the advice and support of the people of the Virgin Islands as to how that money will be best utilized. When you talk about the disaster funding that has been given to us for our 2017 hurricanes, we have had unique challenges in getting that funding. One is, of course, at the outset, because Congress made really dynamic changes in the way and the amount of funding that we could receive, right? We, rather than all of the other areas which can only rebuild to as things were at the time of the storm, Congress gave us and had the foresight and thought it was more fiscally responsible and agreed with the argument that my office had been making for a number of years that the underfunding of Congress really exacerbated the hurricanes. And so we were given funding and we could include pre-disaster costs. Now, while in the long run, that's going to allow us to build better, to be more resilient, to create microgrids, to have more resilient schools, public buildings, roads, etc., it means that the process by which the federal government agrees to what those pre-disaster costs has taken a significantly longer time. Coupled with that is the fact that we do not have the personnel in terms of not skill set, but sheer numbers to be able to handle billions of dollars, when in the past we may have received tens of millions of dollars. And so I believe that Ms. Williams has been doing an amazing job with trying to ramp up a group and to manage the relationship with FEMA and with others to ensure that while the process may be taking longer, in the end we will come out much better than when we were before the storms. And so, we have been working with them to ensure that that's done, to push FEMA as well as HUD, where the largest pot of CDBG funding is, to, come off of their heels, come to agreement with us on what those costs were so that we can rebuild our schools, rebuild our hospitals, etc. When it comes to this funding that's coming in now, I think that we have been learning lessons from how we have used the funding from the 2017 disaster funding, and I'm hopeful that the local government as well as the federal government will use those lessons in ensuring that this moves much faster. So our office is here to support the governor, the local legislature, as well as those agencies and how it's using the funds, but it would be inappropriate for me to tell them the process by which they should do that.
Thank you,
Thank you, Ms. Schimmer. Thank you. Next, we have Doug Harris with NPR.
Yeah, good afternoon, Doug Harris.
Good afternoon, Doug. You good?
Yes, Congresswoman, thank you. This is like a roundabout question with education. Now, I believe a lot of the funding, or quite a bit of the funding for education is tied to attendance. We've also had quite a few school closings, some for odor, some for sewer problems, some for water problems. But with all of these closings, how does that affect the federal funding with education, with our schools? Any of those affected?
That's a great question. Fortunately for us, in this Education Stabilization Fund, Congress reserved an amount for small territories to be divided based on their respective needs, not necessarily on attendance or otherwise. And so we have, we got a need and an assessment amount for distance learning and the needs to bring the local Department of Education up to speed to be able to handle this. And the amount that we have been given by the federal government exceeds the amount that they have requested by more than almost $15 million.
Well, that's real good to know. Thank you so much, Congresswoman. You have a great
day. Thank you, sir.
And last week,
and just so that Doug and others are aware, this past year and a half, this has really been, interestingly, with the Department of Education, a really huge issue for my office, is that we have recognized the digital divide that exists in education, as well as in other areas. Mike can share with you op-eds that I've written in national papers about the idea that as we are growing, that the Internet is now the greatest accelerant of businesses as well as of individuals' lives. And this pandemic has really demonstrated the divisions in our country based on location and, more importantly, based on economics. And so we recognize that children like those in the Virgin Islands, where 43% of our children live below poverty, are not going to have the tools to be engaged in distance learning. And so myself and several other members really pushed that this be in the legislation so that our children do not fall even further behind. Our children are our greatest asset, and we do not want children out for weeks, months, particularly in the Virgin Islands who have been through so much already, and fall further behind than they might be even before this event took place. So this funding is there for the needs, not so much as based on population that each of the locations have said. And we believe that the Virgin Islands, the Department of Education, has been given sufficient funding to be able to create the type of dynamic distance learning that kids in private sectors in more wealthy districts have, so that they can be able to compete.
And thank you. Next we have Amaziah George with the State and Territory.
Hi, good afternoon, Congresswoman, and everyone on the call.
Good afternoon, Amaziah.
Two questions, and I came on the call a little bit late, so I'm sorry if you went over it already. But could you briefly explain the grant recently awarded to WAPA, and how has the Veterans Healthcare System for Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands been wrapped into the coronavirus stimulus package?
Great. The first question, WAPA had applied for assistance from FEMA for administrative management costs that were related to the hurricane and to support that was done after the 2017 hurricane. This grant that they've been given is to pay for some of those primarily administrative and technical support that they needed and that was already paid out during that time. With regard to your second question, repeat that one again, Amaziah. Oh, the veterans, correct? So it's our understanding that the funding for veterans, there's authorization for VA to contract with telecom companies for temporary broadband services in telehealth areas, which we believe will be really supportive to our own veterans so that they are not going to the Veterans Hospital in Puerto Rico immediately, which we know has had several positive cases of the coronavirus. Additionally, we are requesting, we are hoping that our veterans clinics, both on St. Thomas and St. Croix, apply to some of the funding that's available under this Marshall Plan for hospitals to assist them in emergency funding for uncovered costs due to the pandemic. And that's going to be dispersed by HHS Secretary, by the Department of Health and Human Services. So the veterans, we believe, will be issues will be addressed, their needs in terms of health will be addressed there. I just want you all to know on the call, we actually have a fellow in our office. Her name is Candia Rivera. She will be in our office for 2 years. She is a veteran, and we have received her support through the Wounded Warrior Program. And so she is there to assist. Specifically, one of her roles is to support veterans in the Virgin Islands. But Amaziah, part of that funding that for telehealth is also related to mental health. We know that that is an issue that has been not addressed appropriately for our veterans, and there's a large amount of funding that's available to them for mental health purposes as well.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Congresswoman, do you have any final statements you would like to make?
Well, once again, I just want to thank everyone for coming on the call. I think you guys are doing a great job of just keeping us, who are the elected officials in the Virgin Islands. The questions that you all have are the questions that people in the Virgin Islands want to know. I want to thank you for calling in and staying on top of this. And I think we're going to try and send out some additional information that gives kind of a short breakdown with most frequently asked questions that are related to some of these issues. But as I said, this is just continually changing and moving, and as we get more information about the distribution, about how money will be dispersed, we will definitely let you know. And we're going to continue to work closely with the governor and with our legislature to ensure that we get every bit of money that's available. Also, as I said, we're also working on the fourth bill. The governor and our office work together to make a request to Congress of the things that we need for an economic stimulus, not just to shore up where our funding will be lost, but, we're looking at to have forgiveness of our community disaster loans, small business loan forgiveness, waiver of cost shares for our FEMA rebuilding, as well as to correct some technical tax issues that will allow us to be able to attract other businesses to our shores. So thank you all so much for your patience and for staying on the line this long. And again, just want to remind our small businesses that we're going to have a webinar Monday, March 30th at 12 p.m. to learn more about the new economic stimulus package available for businesses that are under 500 employees. Wayne Huddleston, Senior Area Manager for Small Business Administration, as well as Ted Gutierrez, who's the State Director for the SBDC, will also be on Zoom with us to answer your questions. Thank you all, and thanks, Mike. Everyone be very safe and take care.
Thank you, everyone. And if you have additional questions, please reach out to me by phone or email. Thank you, and everyone have a good day.